Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Think Thursday webinar series. I'm Don Lupo, Director of Marketing with ThinkLA. We're so glad you could join us today. For more webinars, events, and information about membership, please visit our site at thinkla.org and be sure to sign up for our newsletter. We're very fortunate to have today from Samba TV, Dan Ackerman, Chief Revenue Officer, and Dr. Jeffrey Silverman, Director of Data Science and Analytics. Please submit your questions during this session and we'll have a Q&A at the end. Thank you both for being here today. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Don. Really appreciate it and welcome everybody. We're very excited to be here and have some pretty interesting statistics to share with you. Make sure everyone can see my screen here. Great, awesome. Welcome. So we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to go over some viewership trends and key insights about this massive change that we're all experiencing now. Kind of pre-health crisis and the big shift in behavior over the last 30 days, how that's impacting our industry, how that's impacting ad strategies from both brands and agencies and helping to navigate through this, what that may mean for us as a new normal going forward, and how we're all adapting to the new landscape. And we'll go through some Q&A to make sure that we cover everybody's questions. So just a quick primer on Samba TV and what puts us in a good position to be able to understand these changes in viewership and really understand on a holistic basis how people are watching television across linear, over the top, connected TV, all these new streaming services. We are a TV data and technology company with really three core components to what we do. We have a piece of technology. It's a sensor that sits inside of smart televisions and helps to analyze and understand what's being displayed on the screen. So it really gives you that holistic view, regardless of a over-the-air signal, something coming through a gaming device, through an OTT device, whatever is the path that gets that content to your screen. Our technology is processing that, understanding it. And there's really a couple of core use cases for that. One of them is to help power the navigation process for consumers. So via an API, providing that data to your television, to guides, to third-party apps, to help find and navigate through thousands and thousands of options of great content out there that's coming to our TV every day. And then, of course, some very critical business applications for how the advertising ecosystem works. It's not just the TV, it's also understanding how that connects to our digital world, to all of the devices that are so important to our daily behavior and how we access content, how we access information, is building a device graph that helps to string together all the devices in a household that are associated with the TV. So not just having a good understanding of what's being viewed, but also how those consumers are then interacting with those brands, interacting with that content on their mobile, tablet, and desktop devices. So we built out a device graph that helps to understand all those digital devices in that household and map those two things together to create some connective tissue between the two. And then the third is how do you make sense of all of that? We've created a panel that helps to understand both the demographics and geographics, all the different attributes that make up the people and the households. So you can start to make some intelligent decisions about what's happening in those households and project that out to the overall universe in every market that we operate. And this is a global data set. This is a technology and data that we operate here in the US, as well as many other countries, especially in those key media markets in Europe and Australia, in Asia Pacific regions. And that's what we operate today, and that's what really drives the insights and the information that we'll talk about today. We've done this through partnerships, exclusive relationships with over 20 television brands, TV brands that go from household brand, in-house brands at Walmart that you may see at low price points that democratize the access to this kind of technology, all the way up to the latest, greatest that you see at CES every year in the new 4K and 8K TVs. That we built this up over the last 12 years, and what gives us the opportunity to have a great view geographically, demographically, and socioeconomically across the entire marketplace, both in the US and in every market that we operate in globally. What we do is we take that data and we've been able to turn that into some really valuable insights. And we do collect all of this data in real time. So every day that we're in shelter in place, every day that a new streaming service comes out, that behavior of those content sources, the content distributors changes, and being able to have a clear view of all of that to make sense of it and generate insights is what Jeffrey and his team and all the technologists behind this are generating every day. And just to get an understanding of the overall landscape, this is not new news, but I think helps to validate our understanding of what role connected TV and over the top plays. 3 out of 4 households are a connected TV household. There's been a drastic decrease in pay TV subscriptions and a drastic increase in the availability of connected TVs and the content that you can access directly through the television or through separate devices. And now more than 3/4 of the entire population are watching ad supported, but also the majority of the population is streaming. We can all speak to what our binges are over this period of working from home. We can see through the statistics, but also just personally as human beings, our viewing habits have changed pretty drastically. And cutting the cord is accelerating. And certainly this experience now in looking at the decrease in availability of depth of libraries of content within traditional television exacerbates the challenge, especially when viewing goes up, and it will accelerate the cord cutting. And our options continue to increase. There was just statistics yesterday that Disney Plus has exceeded 60 million paid subscribers, which was their forecast for 2024. So that adoption, I think, is exceeding anybody's expectations. So we saw massive launches of Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, and we have 2 or 3 more massive ones with huge libraries from legacy, both from movies, television shows, with HBO Max coming this month, and Peacock releasing to Comcast subscribers, and then more broadly later this year. So the amount of streaming services continues to increase, and the distribution of those massive and really interesting libraries. It's not just Netflix, it's not just Amazon Prime, but there are lots of other options coming down the pike. Jeff?
Yeah, so let's dig into some of the numbers that we've been seeing at Samba over the last month and a half, basically. So unsurprisingly, overall television watching time is up about 85% compared to last March. And specifically, daytime television is up. You've got millions of kids at home, you've got people working from home, and so daytime television is more than doubled from last year. And so what we're really seeing, kind of the biggest first takeaway that we saw during this COVID crisis and shelter in place, is that daytime is the new prime time. And it's not only more viewership time, but it's more homes watching daytime programming. So, maybe you had someone at home during the day, or kids at home, young kids at home during the day previously, but now you've got a lot of households that didn't have anyone at home watching TV during the day. And now we're seeing a 50% growth in just the number of homes that are watching daytime programming. And so we can dig in a little bit deeper and see what kind of programs are gaining these viewers. And unsurprisingly, news programs are gaining a lot. So if we look at the major cable news networks, their year-over-year viewership time has increased 272%. You can see the breakout by the major news networks. And so time spent watching these cable news networks is up massively year over year. And we can also take a look at specifically, again, during the daytime hours. You see all those numbers are even bigger. So all of these cable channels are gaining viewership, amount of time viewed overall and during the daytime hours, in just absolutely huge numbers compared to last year.
Yeah, just an interesting point there. The HUTs, the households using television, and PUTs, people using television, spike is something that obviously is changed right now because we're all working from home. But more importantly, it's what they're sampling and where the spike in linear is coming from, things that will be short term in relation to this. But I think the overall impact on television more broadly outside of news is what we'll start to see as this normalizes and people get back to offices. This will be a short-term spike. And then the real impact will be of where the general viewing is going outside of just this acute need for news and information.
So continuing on with this idea of looking at the cable channels, not only, again, is the amount of time that people are watching these channels, but the number of households, yet again, are increasing, just huge numbers year over year. So the number of households tuning in, we're seeing double, triple, quadruple what the cable news networks were seeing year over year. And so to translate that into actual households, CNN gained over 12 million brand new households viewing their channel compared to last March. And, you can see some of the other big cable news networks gaining, over 10 or almost 10 millions of brand new households that weren't watching these cable channels just a year ago. And so, part of this is this halo effect of, hopefully they're going to continue to watch these networks even after people are going back to normal and we're through this crisis. And it's not just cable news, the large broadcast network nightly news programs are also gaining millions of brand new households. And we compared this actually just to January. So just a couple of months ago, compared to March during the sort of shelter in place and as this crisis is getting more and more pervasive, multiple millions of brand new TV households are watching these major programs. And again, these are linear live TV viewers, something that has been in decline for a long time. And so are these people going to continue to watch these broadcast networks? Are they going to continue to watch these as we come out of this? That's sort of a question that I think a lot of advertisers and people and the networks themselves are going to be asking. And another kind of unsurprising but kind of fun fact of where these viewers are coming from and where this increase in viewership is coming from or going to is children's programming. Again, you've got millions and millions of school-age kids, elementary through high school, that are at home during the day, and they're watching TV. They're watching more time on these channels, and new households are watching these channels. And we can look at also premium channels. So not only just the sort of standard cable or even the broadcast networks, but looking at the premium channels, the paid subscriptions, the Starz, Showtime, HBO families. We're seeing a lot of people watching that, again, watching more and more time, and more households tuning in compared to year over year. And it's not only new content, it's not only, new movies that are coming out or, the new episodes of Westworld on HBO, but people are coming back to some of the old classics. I think we can call, if you hit the build there, Dan, I think we can call Game of Thrones a classic now. Even season 8, I would say, is part of the classic. But we're seeing, month over month in recent history of, people watching season 8 of Game of Thrones again, or maybe for the first time, in pretty big numbers and gaining some viewership there of a show that was on in the last year, but people are going back to these classics. I've heard lots of people re-binging lots of good shows that they like.
Yep, the Sopranos have come up quite a bit. An interesting move by HBO recently, starting to open up some of these libraries for free for a short period of time as promotional moves to get a bird's eye view into what HBO Max will look like coming down the line. I think this goes back to that point of the depth of the libraries in broadcast. Production has come to a halt. There are no new television shows. There's no new pilots being developed. So that library will shrink very, very fast. And the legacy libraries, the past seasons of many of these shows, are in syndication on cable networks, but are also starting to be ring fenced around these streaming services. So the ability to sample now and have the depth to persist beyond this window when new programming will start to come online from production when it gets back to. So the advantage definitely sits within a lot of these streaming services and premium channels.
So speaking of streaming, the last kind of high-level results that I want to dig into here at the beginning of the presentation is, streaming, the OTT over-the-top services are, as expected, lots of people talking about this, are gaining quite a bit of viewership. So we looked at sort of a combination of Netflix and Amazon Prime year over year. Hulu put out some of their own statistics recently, and they're seeing pretty significant gains in viewership. And again, looking sort of hour by hour even during the course of a week. The next little chart down here, we show some streaming growth, within individual hours. Most of the hours of the day are seeing, sort of 5 to almost 15% growth hour by hour. And so, this was already a huge growth area of TV viewership, and we're sort of just seeing the acceleration of that growth and that adoption by even more people during this pandemic.
Yeah, definitely fascinating statistic about how much viewing is happening during business hours when we're supposed to be on Zoom calls and operating business. Netflix is spiking during that daytime hour as well. It's not just news. So just quick recap here. I think we're all pretty as things we would assume is that the spike in daytime is going up. But I think when you look across the landscape, looking at streaming and looking at primetime and the kind of content that's being consumed during the day is really fascinating trends and has a long-term impact on business, advertising, the way that we're planning and thinking about that. New households coming back. We saw huge decline in live viewership, and with sports going away, that's really the king and queen and prince and princess of live viewership. So households are turning to that. Jeff alluded to some of these trends, just the massive, tens of millions of people coming into these environments. Hopefully that's sustainable, that these channels will be able to maintain some of those, but common thinking would believe that's just short term. But I think the probably the biggest takeaway here is the migration and the sampling and streaming. And we made the point a couple times about the depth of libraries. This is something that we believe will not change. We've already seen the trends of cord cutting, the declines in live linear viewership, and the rapid acceleration of adoption and viewership within these streaming services. This is another opportunity. There'll probably be a catalyst to accelerate that even faster than it had before, because we're forced into different behavior. So in terms of what this is doing to the advertising landscape, there are tons of surveys going out there and a lot of information coming to the market. But right now, as we're seeing, close to 3/4 of all marketers are making pretty drastic changes to budgets and what the expectation and the outlook is, not just for short term here in Q2, but how they look at the remainder of the year and second half and what that impact is. Some have talked about much longer term impact that could stretch out multiple quarters, but at least looking at 2020 and early 2021. There are a pocket of advertisers that are looking to boost their ad budgets. There are lots that would need to recoup and make up for lost time during this disruption by this health crisis. There's also lots of marketers who have opportunity to take advantage of this. A lot of the obvious ones like streaming in the entertainment space, home workout, video conferencing, but there's a lot that are emerging right now that are seeing this as an opportunity to capture market share, to reaffirm to consumers that they are here, they're strong brands, they're trusted, they care about the community, and they will persist. I think the biggest one for all of you in the advertising ecosystem is, again, this kind of rapid acceleration to change. People that had maybe considering investments in linear and moving that to digital or moving it to connected TV or OTT are now being forced to during this change in behavior. We just don't believe that's ever going to come back, and the surveys certainly support that in the sentiment from leading marketers. And the three strategies that we're seeing employed in the marketplace right now, I think this was a kind of early knee-jerk reaction in the first couple of weeks of March, where people just went dark. They said, I don't have the right creative. They wanted to be sensitive, people hugging, people gathering, that were just in direct conflict to the recommendations of the World Health Organization, the CDC. So retooling to not only see what the impact on their business, but how they could change creative and speak to that. And then a shift from product or response-based advertising into brand, again, to reaffirm their position in the marketplace, their position in the community. And we're starting to see that with some really creative approaches to changing their TV creative, their video creative, and digital, and their creative really across the board. And then there's that are going with business must go on. And these are things that are a little bit more durable to crisis, certainly in the CPG categories, which are facing a very different phenomenon, which is the supply chain disruption. They can't make enough product and get it to the shelves. So what we're seeing right here, obviously, travel, entertainment, hospitality was one that was impacted the most, and we saw a massive drop off here. Jeff, if you want to go through some of the statistics that we're seeing in ad placements, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. So, tracking what commercials are being run, just looking at the hotel industry. This is from 20 of the biggest hotel chains that run TV ads in the country. And just a chart of each day in March, how many ads were these 20 hotel companies running on TV. And you see for the first half of the month, bounces around, but sort of around the 500 ads per day over, nearly 100 TV networks. And then just a precipitous drop off to, entire, huge hotel chains just stopping all TV advertising whatsoever. And basically by the last week of March, there's almost none. I think the last 6 days of March, there was a grand total of like 20 TV ads run on, 100 networks within the US.
Yeah, and as we alluded to here, that shift in messaging, and we've seen this from the auto companies, which were one of the fastest to make that pivot to change, and they have experience. I mean, if we go back to 9/11, we go to the financial crisis. I think the auto industry is just part of the fabric of not only our community but the global community, and they have all been very nimble in the way that they have pivoted, not only from a business perspective and looking at what the business advantage could be of low financing, but more importantly about the creative to be much more brand level and speak to the community and their position in that. One of the most adversely affected, at least early on, is certainly the restaurant industry. So you've seen Little Caesars and McDonald's completely change its creative and pivot to delivery services, their partnerships with things like DoorDash and Uber Eats, to make sure that they're servicing a community who relies on them for multiple meals on a daily basis. Also, some really fascinating stuff is, we can't get into studios, we can't do production like we're used to. So a lot of creativity in how we're producing new ads. You've probably all read about the new Toyota ads shot via Zoom. So we've seen people shoot things on iPhones and then other creative ways to do it, but this is a whole new normal. Fortunately, we've got great video and great audio on this conference today, but that's not always the case. So pretty incredible that brands have been able to pivot that quickly and make that change to production.
And so, yeah, taking a deeper look at the auto industry that Dan was mentioning, not nearly, this is the same kind of chart that we showed earlier for the hotel industry. Each of the sort of gray lines in the background are different automakers, about 25 major automakers that advertise on TV, looking at a couple of weeks in the middle of March. And then this purple line is just the average number of auto ads per day. And you see it's, pretty flat, maybe decreasing a little bit. And we see individual automakers, a wide variety of responses. Some, decreasing, kind of like the hotel industry, decreasing the number of ads per day, going dark. Some, going dark and retooling and coming back. A couple of, auto brands that Dan just mentioned, specifically changing their creatives and adding more ads per day, kind of ramping up, and then some kind of keeping steady. If they think that their creatives are doing okay and they want to just kind of keep their brand awareness in people's minds. And so the average of the industry is actually pretty flat. So we see a wide variety of responses just in this one large, advertiser industry.
And this industry, probably more than any, is so reliant on sports. So the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball, huge investments there. So reallocating those GRPs. And I think there was a professional that I spoke to that thought that there was somewhere in the range of 14 to 18,000 GRPs that are being disrupted. So replacing that kind of premium rating points in the market is extremely, extremely difficult. So autos have been very challenged on how they reallocate those. And then with the Olympics looming, there were some major investments there. So very difficult in replacing that. And this is definitely a high volume, high frequency kind of industry for long sales cycle products like an auto.
And then the last sort of ad trend strategy that we're seeing is what Dan mentioned earlier, that sort of some businesses must go on. And to sort of attack that, one way to do it is to move where you're advertising, moving to CTV, connected TV, and OTT streaming services. So, the kinds of connected TV apps where we're seeing a large increase in ad requests, which, means that there's just more viewers watching those apps. We see them, involving food and drink, news apps, style and fashion, connected TV apps. And if you look at sort of CTV overall, the number of ad requests went up 71%, while linear saw a 32% increase. So again, more ad requests coming from CTV platforms is just more people watching connected TV and connected TV apps. And so, Dan, did you want to talk about aligning the strategy, or shall I dive into some of these?
Yeah, why don't you take this? I'll take the next one.
All right, sounds good. So sort of, we wanted to leave people with some ideas on, what we think the strategy should be going forward, and getting at individual TV behaviors, content affinity, how people watch TV, what people watch on TV is sort of, just generally good advice for this kind of question. But the real issue now is, you may not have an ability to get at your live sports viewers anymore. That's an obvious one to, advertise to, but there aren't really live sports going on right now. So how can you access that audience? How can you get your ad in front of those eyeballs if those sports, those obvious things aren't on anymore? And so one thing that we can do at Samba is we can try to find those viewers, and we can use our data to figure out what those viewers are watching that aren't able to watch live sports anymore. So if we go to the next chart, I can dive deep into a little bit on looking at basketball viewers. So looking at sort of the last couple of months of the NBA season before it was put on hold, taking all those households that watched basketball, what else are they watching on TV? So they're watching a lot of news. That's obvious, like a lot of Americans, but a number of other channels too. So the numbers here, the bars, are the viewership index. So basically, how much more likely are basketball viewers to watch these networks as compared to the US average? And so, for example, we can also look at individual programs, similar things. So I'll use an example on this one. So what this is telling us is that, your basketball viewers, they're watching some, kind of syndicated or old shows on BET and VH1. But maybe something a little bit more surprising is, if you want to get your ads in front of basketball viewers, think about some shows on ABC. This Week with George Stephanopoulos is watched 2.56 times more than the US household on average for these basketball viewers. And so again, looking at a specific audience that you want to advertise to, you may not be able to get directly at them because that content no longer exists. People are switching their behaviors, but we can see what else those people are watching and advise where you might want to access that audience.
Yeah, some of the non-obvious ones, mapping NBA playoffs to Curb Your Enthusiasm are some of the non-obvious ones. I think this is a high-level overview, but getting down into the depth, the way that brands and agencies, the way we think about planning and the information, obviously it's been turned on its head. This change in behavior right now, and this extended change in behavior, and how it will likely roll out to impact summer viewing and likely even fall, as a lot of these schedules and a lot of production has been disrupted. These are pretty important inputs to not only understand where kind of core consumers, where prospecting consumers are moving towards, but how to think about placement of media. Where do you reallocate with your network partners across their full episode player, their OTT, and then other players that are aggregating some of this new viewership and where these audiences are going. But being able to map where that environment, that important basketball viewer, baseball viewer, hockey viewer, where they're going, they just don't have the option. There's certainly not, there's only so many ESPN 30 for 30s you can watch. There's only so many replays of your favorite championship series you can watch before you got to move on.
All right, so we'll try to pick up the pace just a little bit to get through our last few points and leave us with some Q&A time. But some other advice that we have for people, anytime you're doing any kind of measurement, TV advertising, digital advertising, any kind of measurement, you want to ensure that you have a huge and representative data set. And so, checking that you have a global data set like Samba TV and in the countries highlighted here. And then talking about how not only scale overall, but scale in each market. So I did a little bit of an experiment with one of our, with some TV viewership data. But what you can do is you can say if you have a research panel of 3 million versus a research panel of 60,000, you want to use those panel households to represent the entire 112 million US households. And so what does that actually mean? What does the numbers mean between the difference in those sizes? So the first panel would end up with an average weight of 37. So each panel household represents 37 US households. And then with this smaller panel, the other company would have an average weight of 1,867. So each panel household for that company represents 1,867 other US households. Okay, so why does that matter? It matters for The Bachelorette. So The Bachelorette finale was over the summer, and 4.5 million US TV households tuned in. That translates to about 4.02% of all TV households in the US. Now, let's say that there was some issue with your TV measurement partner or something along the line that you accidentally attributed 300 TV households to watching The Bachelorette that didn't actually tune in. So how would that affect these two companies? Company S, with its 6 million household panel, barely affected. 4.03% is what they would measure. Company N, with its much smaller panel, would have a huge effect. They would measure 4.52% of US households. So they're off by half a percentage point, or that's actually about 10% difference if we click that last little bubble there. So you have a 10% variance based off of this smaller panel. So you need a large panel that's representative to get the answer right and to protect yourself against any kind of potential issues like this. And then the last sort of experiment that I want to go through is I partnered with one of our clients to analyze one of their national ad campaigns. And we mentioned at the top that we partner with a number of TV brands, and Dan was talking about how the diversity of those brands matter, from lower end models that most people can afford to the fanciest high-end 8K super cutting edge TV and everywhere in between. And so I partnered with this client, looked at one of their ad campaigns, and basically pretended we only had individual TV brands. So we looked at their campaign, we used a panel made up of just one TV brand, ran all the numbers, projected it to the US, and did that for all 5 of these brands. And you can see a huge variance between the answer that we get when you look at an individual brand. And so this was using all the same methodology, all the same code. And so each one of those bars, the only difference between them is the TV brand. And when we run it with our full panel using all the TV brands we partner with, we get the real answer of about 35 million. And so, TV brand 3 got close to the right answer, but not quite. And then some of the other brands were just way off. And so brand to brand variances can show up as a huge change in the measured answer. And so your TV measurement partner has to have a diversity of TV brands to be able to wash out any kind of differences that we know exist between the different brands.
That's right. Yeah, the geographic, the demographic, the socioeconomic bias that lives within anyone based on distribution, price point. Great point, Jeff.
And so Don asked us to make some predictions. So we're looking into our magic 8-ball of where we think this is going. I'll take the first one. So my first prediction here, I think, sports is going to return sooner than later. A lot of leagues are talking about doing events with no fans, but putting it on TV. At Samba, we've seen that really sports has huge viewership still. It's the last bastion of live TV viewership. As an example, this past weekend, WrestleMania took place over 2 nights with no fans in the arena, but they had viewership increases year over year for last year's event, which was 1 day. So they broke it up into 2 days. Each day had pretty significant increase in viewership, and that's for WrestleMania. So baseball is talking about restarting the season or starting the season in the near future with no fans, and people are just hungry for that content. So if you want to get your ads in front of a lot of TV eyeballs in the near future, I think sports is the way to go.
Yeah, I think the other one, which we've alluded to a few times throughout the presentation, is this movement to connected TV and OTT for viewers is not one that is a seasonal or short-term change. Our prediction is that this is going to be the new environment that we work in, that people that have cut the cord, they've moved into these new environments, they've sampled these new streaming services, are not coming back. They have found huge libraries, quality content, a lot of new content that they discovered for themselves individually as adults, for families, for kids. There may just not be a reason to go back, especially at the price point and the diversity that they've been able to experience during this time. And the shifts in budgets, we've been talking about this for years of linear shifting into connected TV and OTT and into digital. Again, this is a catalyst for that shift to happen faster. You can change your creative faster. You have more control over targeting. You have more understanding of delivery, impact on your business. That's not going to go back. And what we've heard from agency leadership who are thinking about how they're communicating and guiding and mentoring and providing strategic direction to their customers is that this is a new way that we have to think about it. The way we planned television previously, the way we planned media activation previously is just not going to go back. And let's look at the glass half full of a reason to rethink the way we do it to better align with how consumers behave. So thank you very much. Sorry if we ran a little bit long there. Happy to share this deck. I know this is recorded so everybody can get these insights. We have been posting insights weekly, great distribution across all of the industry trades in Forbes and Wall Street Journal. And you can also find those at the Samba TV website. And Jeffrey and his team are going to continue to pump those out during this crisis. And then also for the long term, so you can have the pulse of television and understand those trends in real time. Don?
Thank you both so very much for that. That was incredibly informative. A couple of quick questions. So how do you think cable providers are going to be reacting to, or the cable television platform? How do you think that's going to react to this switch now to connected into OTT?
Yeah, I'll take a shot, and then Jeffrey, please jump in with some viewership insights. What we've heard from our programmer partners, and then certainly from the agencies, the promotions around bringing back their old libraries. I think some really creative approaches to new programming to try to stay relevant when then there's this gap in programming coming back. And certainly a focus on highlighting, their digital properties. Been big consolidation and lots of acquisitions in a very uncertain time with Tubi going to Fox, with Zumo going to Comcast, and certainly with what Disney has built and what NBC has built. So I think they're already demonstrating how they're shifting to serve consumers outside of the traditional over-the-air or through their cable subscriptions.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add just really quickly, that another thing we're seeing is, this is coming a little bit more from the movie studios, but the early releases or direct to on-demand releases of movies, and movie studios connected with various cable platforms. Like there's lots of these big media conglomerates out there, but I think that that's going to be something that people will just expect. And so if the cable platforms don't continue those relationships with the movie studios for those that aren't directly connected, I think that's something that people are just going to get used to. Whether or not people, I'm confident people will go to movie theaters eventually, but perhaps maybe not in nearly as big a numbers. And so, how do the movie studios connecting with the cable platforms deal with that kind of content and engagement going forward is an interesting idea.
It is. Thank you so much. And one last question. You're saying 85% of viewership, or viewership is up 85%. Are you seeing that that's up across the entire day? Are there day parts that you're seeing more of? For example, are people sitting at their dining room table watching the living room TV, or are they watching across on their laptop while they're working? What are some of your insights into that?
Yeah, so we're seeing the biggest day part that's gaining is daytime. Again, presumably from kids at home, people working at home with a TV in the background, things like that. So we're seeing the biggest gains during the daytime day part, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. local time. We're seeing gains in just about every day part, though. Overall, the entire day, as well as prime time, late night, just everything seems to be up. People are just at home more, watching TV more. But the biggest gains by far are during daytime, right after daytime, kind of right before prime time.
Yeah, and Don, just you saw some of the just the gross number of ads, the homes using television, people using television. Those news programs gaining 5 to 10 million. These are massive. These are doubling and tripling their overall audience. There's just more people using television, so I think there's a all boats rise kind of mentality where all TV is benefiting. But as we pointed out, in an acute level news, I think the most interesting point though is to look at non-ad supported environments. For the advertising community. The spikes in Netflix and Disney Plus and areas where they can't advertise are probably what will create the biggest shift in behavior from us as providers that service the marketing industry to help understand that behavior and then pivot where they can reach those audiences in addressable environments. It's probably one of the biggest sea changes that's happening.
That's very interesting. Well, thank you both so very much, and thank you to everybody who's attended. We actually had a record number of attendees today, so we're so glad you could be with us. Please remember to check thinkla.org for more webinars, events, and information, and our continuing mission to serve the community. Thank you both so much, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.